you'll be excused for thinking that there's an abundance of capital from the headlines, but actually there's a huge deficit for funding for startups, right? And I think maybe let me just qualify that in VC in the classical sense.
Yeah.
Right. But I do believe that there are high net worth people who just need to be inspired with the right story and narrative who could fill that gap.
Yeah.
And that's actually some of the exciting stuff that we're working on now, is organizing these career professionals.
I actually think there's a lot of potential around getting more people to have family offices.
Yeah,
I think.
I completely agree, and we can spend some time there. But the other thing, so that's the capital challenge, is that it's quite difficult, especially at the early stages, right? VC, I think, has underperformed on the continent. So what we're seeing is that a lot more VCs are starting to go later stage, which has created what they call this early stage funding gap.
Yeah,
and that's
South Africa that's huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
And that's what the program should be solving for. But unfortunately, it's not trickling down to the entrepreneur.
Welcome to another edition of Your 2 Cents. And for today, the person giving us their 2 cents is Ntsako Mgiba, who is the founder of Darkies in Tech. We're going to get an understanding of what's happening in the world of ventures, what's happening in the world of technology, the world of startups. What are some of the efforts being made to encourage that culture of starting more businesses in South Africa, especially the tech-enabled ones, and what type of community and mentorship and fellowship is being encouraged, out there in the world. So, Ntsako, greetings to you today.
Mudiwa, thank you so much for having me here today.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure to be here and to chat to you about the ecosystem that I love so dearly.
Let's talk about Darkies in Tech.
Cool.
Interesting name.
Jumping straight to
it. My understanding, around the platform is that it started out as a WhatsApp group, and you were basically trying to see how do we encourage more participation, from Black people when it comes to the technology, the world of technology, world of technology startups. I think around the world, we are seeing that technology and tech startups that are now, bigger businesses scaling. That's where the biggest fortunes are being created right now. Places like the US, and others. And even in South Africa, we've seen some really good success stories. Talk to me about what's happening at the moment that you decide, to start this WhatsApp group. Is it casual? Are you friends with a couple of founders and you say, okay, fine, let's just start something, casually, just so that we can chat? Is there a concerted effort where you're actually seeing a gap? Like, what's that initial impetus about?
Yeah, so the background context was that at the time I was working on a high growth tech company of my own.
Yeah.
And we were trying to democratize access to security in townships. So that was a company called Jonga. So it was still relatively early days in the local tech ecosystem. And myself and my co-founder, we had relative privilege working for us. So what I mean by that is we went to UCT.
Yeah.
And because we had gone to Model C schools, we had the accents that we have. So what I began to notice was that was affording us access to spaces where oftentimes we were the only people of color in those spaces. And in those same spaces, we noticed that really high quality knowledge, networks, and resources were flowing. But because we were trying to build a solution for townships, what that meant was that we were essentially existing in two worlds. One characterized by lack, challenges, and another that's just characterized by abundance, right? Of everything that you need to actually build a successful company. There were people who had done it before. In this other environment, there's no one with such ambitions. So that started to, at first you're flattered, you're allowed access into these spaces, and you feel good that you're the only person there. But And then you start to realize actually it's quite problematic. And I remember for me, what would really hit home was driving back from Stellenbosch, where we were part of like an acceleration program, and driving past Khayelitsha, where we actually do work on the way home. And it just always stuck with me that, unless there's something that exists in the ecosystem, some sort of external intervention, then the tech opportunity was going to land squarely in the laps of our white counterparts.
Yeah.
Because for every one of us, there was 9 of them in the room.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing. But the other thing was, when you're building a startup, what you engage with is the broader ecosystem, and you realize that there's pitch competitions and all of these different things. And I noticed that the only other time we would bump into people like ourselves, Black tech entrepreneurs, on this same journey was when we were pitching against each other at these competitions. So the framing in a pitch competition is inherently adversarial.
Yes.
So it doesn't lend itself to knowledge transfer and sharing insights about what's worked in your journey or what's worked or what's not worked. So it was a combination of those two things that ultimately just led to me in a moment of frustration, just saying, hey, if we don't get our story straight, if we don't start working together, we're gonna completely miss out on this opportunity. Because this is the kind of behavior we know is happening within other communities, but we're just not doing it. And I feel like the stakes are a lot higher for us because we don't have as much resources. So when we have a shot at goal, we have to make sure we score. So it was a combination of those two things. And I just decided that, okay, it was a day in February 2021.
Yeah.
And I just said, okay, well, I know about 10 odd people who are on a similar journey.
Yeah.
Let's throw everyone onto a group.
Yeah.
And let's have a conversation. So in many ways, it was an experiment.
Out of curiosity, who are some of the first names in the WhatsApp group?
Yeah, sure. Not to expose anyone, but Prince was a part of it, building a fantastic township-based lending business at the moment called Mustard Finance.
Yeah.
Who else was a part of it? I think Elijah, Jan, who was building a business called New Bricks.
Yeah.
So he was building a new kind of brick that could help builders.
Nice.
I think it was sustainable materials and stuff like that make the brick. Who else? Sure. I must actually go back and find out who are those founding 10. I hadn't thought about it in a while. But there's about 10 of us. And
did you guys understand what it is that you're trying to do by starting this group?
No.
Because that's also one of the reasons why I started by asking, was it, I guess, a casual group in the beginning that then turns into something?
So it was an experiment because I wasn't sure what's going to happen.
Okay.
Are we going to just get into this room and complain? Or are we going to, have honest discussions about what's worked in your journey and what's worked in mine?
Yeah.
And I was very pleasantly surprised that, there was very little complaining and a lot of honest, vulnerable conversations being had, but also people trying to help each other. And essentially the clarion call on that day was, if there's someone else that I'm forgetting, like, invite them.
Okay.
And then we'll vet them.
Yeah.
And if we feel like they're one of us, what we mean by that is they're in the trenches, not on the peripheries, then we'll invite them to join. And it just kind of like exploded. I guess word got out that, hey, there's finally a safe space where you don't have to put on a mask or talk a particular way. You can be honest about where you're at and what you're struggling with. And guys would share vulnerably based on their own experience. So it's not just theoretical information, but it's like, oh, I've been in this situation. This is how I handled it. This is how it worked out. And it turns out there was a real need for a space like this to exist. So it started to grow much faster than we had a vision for it. Very quickly, I think before the end of that year, I had already run into the limits of WhatsApp. I don't know if you remember back in the day before.
Yes, the group chats had a certain
before
number
communities,
of people. Yes.
You were limited to about 220.
I think it started out at 20, if I remember correctly.
Okay,
then
that's like the earliest cap. Yeah. So,
okay.
So we ran into the larger limit, but I think about 250.
Yeah.
And it was just a really crowded, monolithic space.
Yeah.
But the odd thing was that no one ever left. And that's because of the value
that was coming
out of that space. And I remember at some point people started to ask me, so, what are we going to do with this? Because there's something here.
Yeah.
Never before have we been organized in this manner. What is the broader vision? And that's when I had to start thinking about that.
What's happening?
Yeah.
All right. I want to take that journey in terms of what happens from that point.
Cool.
But there's two main things I want to address through this conversation. And I'm hoping that as we're addressing them, it also helps us to get a sense of, firstly, what's happening in the ecosystem.
Sure.
And then secondly, how your journey works to try and attack some of these things. Firstly, I believe it's in the Bible where they talk about my people perish for a lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
What is this lack of knowledge?
Yeah, sure.
Right? And I'm asking that because I consider myself as someone who is close to the ecosystem and part of the ecosystem. I have followed a number of these founders and gotten close to a couple of founders, including some that we've had on this specific platform. I've seen a lot of journeys along the way, and there's a couple of interesting data points that feel like they're at odds with the problem that you identify.
Sure.
Right? So in the world, there's a lot of money flowing around venture capital, depending on what numbers you get. Africa, you're sitting at between $5 and $7 billion, in any given year, 5.5, 6 in an average year, right? And a lot of that money is coming to Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, and South Africa.
Yeah.
In many years, South Africa is the one that's getting the majority of that money, though Kenya and Nigeria are really,
those are the three.
They're fighting.
And Egypt as well.
Yeah, they're really fighting at the moment. So in many people's eyes, South Africa has the most developed tech startup and venture capital ecosystem on the continent.
Sure.
That's the one aspect. Second aspect is that you have the ecosystem that you were talking about earlier on, the pitching competitions, the accelerators. You've also got the venture builders. You've also got an element of enterprise supply development where corporates are helping to incubate, certain businesses, startups. Where's the lack? Where's the lack exactly?
Yeah,
because it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity. It sounds like there's a lot of money floating around. It sounds like, and based on a couple of the capital raises, that I've been, covering of late, I think just the other day we had PayMeNow has just bought out, another fintech company recently. So there's a lot of activity in the space. Plus, before we even go anywhere, there's the internet as well.
The great equalizer.
So talk to us. What is the actual lack of knowledge?
Sure.
What are the practical things that are being gained from these one-on-one relationships? What are these intangibles? Especially for someone who doesn't sit on one of these groups or who's not interacting with founders on a daily basis. And they're like, no, listen, I can just go Google this stuff. Or I'm going to go be part of an accelerator and I'll learn this stuff. Like, what are those intangibles that they're not getting?
Sure. Man, my mind is racing as you're speaking because there's just so many, you touched on so many important things. So I think one thing that's worth noting is that in our ecosystem, there's a lot of first-time founders, right? So what that means is that you've never built a business before. And for a lot of them, they're the first entrepreneurs within their family, especially if you're part of our community. Typically, you're a first-time founder. So what that means is that there's a lot of things that you just don't know. And the interesting thing about the journey of building a startup is that a lot of the things that you should be doing at the early stages are actually very counterintuitive, right? To common business advice you might get from a business advisor who's only worked with advising established businesses, right? To give you an example of one of these counterintuitive things is that in the beginning, you have to actively be engaging in activities that don't scale, right? What do I mean by that? You have to be doing unscalable things. You have to be talking to users. As the founder, you have to be signing up your first customers.
Yes.
Things that you can't scale because you have to hire for it and things like that. So there's very few people in our ecosystem who know that counterintuitive advice. And the only way you know it is if you've actually built something before. Because you've learned through the school of hard knocks. Right? So what we're seeing in our ecosystem is that although there's an abundance of people who are sharing startup knowledge, very few of them are qualified to do that because they haven't actually built anything.
Yeah.
So oftentimes the advice they give you is the textbook advice that's actually more applicable to more mature business. And it's very harmful, actually, because now you've got founders that are focusing on the wrong things at the wrong stage of their business. So there's a very big knowledge gap, right? And within our universe of Darkies and tech, we've identified different access gaps. So the first is access to knowledge. What we don't mean is there's not enough literature on startups, but what we're saying is there's not enough contextually relevant, localized knowledge from builders, real people who know what it's like to be in the ring. And that's part of what makes us unique, is that, one, I'm a builder, right? And that's why I've been allowed to convene the community in this way, because my members trust me because I've been there before.
Yeah.
So if you look at a lot of the program providers, you'll find corporates, well-meaning at times, but they'll find the wrong people giving this information to startups. And then these startups have a lot more to unlearn than they have to learn, which is a huge challenge we're experiencing in the ecosystem. Startups that feel overtrained, but when you really test their knowledge of, do you know what it takes to actually build a successful company from 0 to 1? A lot of them don't actually know that. So that's the access to knowledge gap. Then there's access to capital. So to your point, it seems like there's just an abundance of capital floating around the ecosystem. So one of my major critiques about the ecosystem is that it's exactly that. The capital floats around the entrepreneur, but it never lands in the entrepreneur's bank, right? So the people who are getting the money in the ecosystem are the program providers and everyone else besides the entrepreneur, the service providers, the coaches. Everyone seems to be somehow finding this money, right? But then the entrepreneur is invited into spaces where they have to share their story, and they're the only person in the room not getting paid. So there's a lot of what I call opportunity distractions in the ecosystem. So these are distractions disguised as opportunities. Hey, come and, tell us about your journey. Maybe you'll be somebody in the room, that kind of thing. And then oftentimes entrepreneurs are pulled in different directions because, of course, naturally they want to get awareness out there about what they're building. But sometimes those opportunities don't actually materialize into real opportunities. So I call them opportunity distractions. And there's a whole lot of that in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right? So we need to somehow find ways of getting that money into the hands of entrepreneurs. Right? And I think that's where there's a deficit. Now, it's interesting because you might be thinking, well, Ntsako, I go to a lot of these events and I see these Black entrepreneurs there. So what do you mean they're not actually accessing the capital? But what I mean by that is that although there are Black bodies in these events and in these ecosystem stuff, a lot of the times the beneficiaries of the real opportunities are not us. So we're there because we want to learn and we want to equip ourselves, but the deals are not actually being done in those spaces. They're being done elsewhere, over braais, over gatherings.
Yes.
This is where the deals are really being done.
Yeah.
So one would be forgiven for thinking, but our people are participating. Well, not participating in the opportunity of the tech ecosystem. And that's something that we're looking to change as Darkies and Tech. And that's the access to capital gap, right? Then there's the access to talent. And this one is loaded. There's a whole number of reasons why this is loaded. But typically, if you look at the composition of a startup, the team that the founder builds, a lot of the time that team looks like the founder, right? If you look at a white-owned startup, maybe there'll be diversity of talent.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a lot of things that go into that. Trust. Do we think that this is a good leader? There's a lot of assumptions people make. But oftentimes I've noticed when the founder is Black and there isn't a white co-founder, they only pretty much employ Black people. And that's not always by design. Sometimes it's by who will trust you with their career and their journey.
Yeah.
It's very loaded.
Yeah, it is.
So we're trying to figure out how do we then start to showcase and demystify Black leadership, that a Black founder
can do it.
And that even as a white developer, you can trust them to work with them to help them to build this business and to achieve that mission. So that's the access to talent gap. And we're doing a lot of stuff to try and bring talent closer to the entrepreneurs, because at the end of the day, you need top tier talent to succeed. There's no way around that. That's probably one of the most important determinants of success for a startup.
All right. Very quickly.
Yeah.
On your point around money floating around the founder.
Controversial take, yeah.
Yeah, it's controversial, but you're almost preaching to the choir, because when I started out, one of the first analyses I ever did working at Financial Mail at the time.
Yeah.
Was I went and I did this exact investigation.
Yeah.
And at the time, we found that at that time, this must have been, when was this? Late 2018. We found that we just used the capture ESD, enterprise supply. No. BDS. Business business development support.
Yes.
Right. The whole ecosystem that encapsulates your accelerators, your incubators, your all of these programs that are meant to be helping the small entrepreneur to get their business off the ground, give them access to market, maybe give them access to capital, mentorship, all of that stuff. We found at that time that we estimated it was about a 20 billion rand economy.
Yeah.
And that out of that 20 billion or so rand that would float around every year, very little of that money was actually ending up
in the pockets,
in the hands of the actual people.
Yes.
That
we are actually building.
That are actually building, that we are purporting to be helping.
Yeah.
With these systems. So you're preaching to the choir. when it comes to something like that. But the second piece that I'm interested in is, and I think it feeds into even broader, right? Around this is, if you allow me to play devil's advocate for a moment, if we look at Black people, just as Black people within a vacuum, why hasn't there been a bigger push to get? Because I read something very interesting recently. It's a take, it's a view, but I think it lends itself to this discussion.
Sure.
We were talking about, the so-called Stellenbosch mafia. And basically the argument that was being made was, you know what, if you're going to say that there's a Stellenbosch mafia, okay, cool, great. But at least your Stellenbosch mafia is helping.
Yes. Is actually pouring into the ecosystem.
Is actually pouring into the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And helping its people develop, startups build, right? And they're like, a lot of those Stellenbosch mafia people hardly know anything about AI, cloud, software as a service, fintech, but they're making money from it.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're supporting that ecosystem. And the critique was, in the Black ecosystem, there are industrialists, there are business people, there are those that have made it.
Yeah.
Right? Why isn't there the equivalent of, to your earlier point, the Bryce, or any of these spaces where these types of things are happening? So I'm very keen to get your view there.
Yeah. No, it's a fair critique. I always think that, complaining from the outside, that's the cheap seat. Get in the ring and actually put your capital where your mouth is, right? So, I do wonder as well. Of course, people are seeing about the successes, the exits, the likes of Ikoka exiting to Nedbank for 1.2 billion rand. The early investors, the people who backed those entrepreneurs before there was anything to show for it, have all been, generously and handsomely rewarded for that. So I believe that the Black industrialists are reading these headlines, and they what I assume they should be taking out is that there is opportunity here in this space, but we're not seeing enough activity. I'm not going to paint them all with one brush.
Yeah, of course.
There are people who are doing the Lord's work undercover, writing these angel checks, the 50,000, 100,000 rand in some of the startups. And a lot of our members will attest to the fact that they've met incredible people like that. But by and large, I think, venture still remains a very risky endeavor. And for a lot of people who have just come into wealth for the first time, I think they're kind of entering into the phase in the arc where it's about wealth preservation. So they're looking for more traditional, less risky bets to preserve their wealth in. So I think that there's definitely a bit of privilege around the right to play when you've enjoyed wealth for a certain level, at a certain level for a certain duration of time. you now start to wonder, how do I diversify and actually take some of the riskier bets? So there's a fair element and concern around, I just got here. Can I just stay here? But I think it's not an excuse, because at the end of the day, we are having to, make up for lost time. And there are incredible Black entrepreneurs. In fact, there's more Black entrepreneurs in the country, even tech entrepreneurs, surprisingly, than there are white tech entrepreneurs. Right? The majority of the Black ones, I think, are in our community now, but I could be wrong. They're there, and they're building. And the reality is that when they sit across the table from a white investor, there's a trust deficit there. And it's not even a conscious bias. It's a lot of times an unconscious bias. And I always tell even our entrepreneurs, when they, we're licking our wounds, feeling a bit, disappointed by what we're experiencing, I tell them that you have to remember that when a white investor sits across the table from a white entrepreneur, there's so much they have in common. Perhaps they went to the same school. They have the same family structure. When they see them, they see a younger version of themselves.
Yeah.
So for them to do that deal, there's a lot of things that have already been de-risked by virtue of a shared lived experience.
Yes.
So when they sit across the table from you and you come from a completely different environment, different value set, there are so many different risks that they're trying to validate in that conversation, right? So it's important to understand what is happening, what are the dynamics at play in that conversation, right? So to the Black investor, you now have the responsibility of knowing that you need to be the person sitting on the other side of the table when these Black entrepreneurs are pitching, because you have a shared lived experience, right? You know that, by virtue of having gone to Orovelani High School, that's actually a good school, but it's a township school, So I think those are the things that are lacking, and I think that's why, as a Black investor, you have to push and challenge yourself to participate, because otherwise, those entrepreneurs are pitching to people who don't understand them.
Yes.
So it's not to excuse them entirely, but I'm a pragmatist. I'm always trying to think about it from the perspective of, what is the investor thinking? And I think we need more founders thinking like investors. And we need more investors thinking like founders.
100%. And I guess part of the reason why we've located so much of our discussion around race is because the platform is Darkies and
Darkies and Tech.
But I wanted to take a step back quickly to get your sense as someone who is leading or curating this economy. Because I think sometimes certain things will get conflated when it comes to race. But I wanted to just get a pulse check from you around the lived experience of because there's certain things that are unique to Black founders, right? And you've articulated a lot of those. But I wanted to just check, there's certain things that are just common across the board.
Entrepreneurship is just hard.
Yes. And we just say, this is the reality of being a founder in South Africa.
Yes.
And then there's the realities of being a Black founder in South Africa.
Yes.
So I want to go the level up where we just talk about of the different things that people are going through. What would you say are the things that are just a common reality of being a founder in South Africa that perhaps people take for granted and will just say, oh no, it's because I'm Black, but actually
it's entrepreneurship is just that hard. So I think one, there's a talent shortage. So what I mean by that is not that we don't have talented people in South Africa, but it's just that in order to build tech, you need a certain kind of talent, right? You need experienced developers, because consumers and enterprises have got high standards when it comes to security, reliability, and all of these things. And I find that there's a lot more junior development talent than there is senior. So what that's done is that it's created a lot of competition for the senior talent. So it's not uncommon for a person to be the CTO of like 3 or 4 startups. And that's happening.
Wow.
It's crazy. So there's not enough.
I've heard of 2 at a time, but I didn't know
it
goes up to 4.
Look, these devs can be naughty sometimes, I must say. But I think that's a challenge. Like real senior tech leadership is a deficit. And I think we're competing with the banks. We're competing with, guys who can really pay these developers what they're worth. So I always tell the entrepreneurs, this is actually one of the first tests that you're going to have to overcome if you're worth your salt. You're going to have to somehow convince a developer away from a very high paying opportunity from a corporate to hitch their bandwagon onto your journey. And you can't avoid it. Everyone has had to do that. Every successful tech company has a tech co-founder. You can't avoid it. It's in the name. Tech co-founder. So I tell them that, like, yes, you can dabble with agencies and stuff like that. Guys can help you get your MVP out there. Now we have AI, so you don't really even need that. But at some point, you are going to need somebody who's going to, take accountability for the stability and the robustness of that platform.
Yeah.
So that's something that's just hard across the board. Is we're all fighting for talent, right? And then the other is funding. Interestingly enough, I mean, you'll be excused for thinking that there's an abundance of capital from the headlines, but actually there's a huge deficit for funding for startups, right? And I think maybe let me just qualify that in VC in the classical sense.
Yeah.
Right. But I do believe that there are high net worth people who just need to be inspired with the right story and narrative who could fill that gap.
Yeah.
And that's actually some of the exciting stuff that we're working on now, is organizing these career professionals.
I actually think there's a lot of potential around getting more people to have family offices.
Yeah.
I think.
I completely agree, and we can spend some time there. But the other thing, so that's the capital challenge, is that it's quite difficult, especially at the early stages, right? VC, I think, has underperformed on the continent. So what we're seeing is that a lot more VCs are starting to go later stage, which has created what they call this early stage funding gap.
Yeah, and that's South Africa. That's huge.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
And that's what the program should be solving for. But unfortunately, it's not trickling down to the entrepreneur. So that's a concern. But I guess probably the biggest of all is the access to market.
Yeah.
This is something we all have to deal with.
Yeah.
Once again, race does play a role here, because if you have relationships with key decision makers within corporates, chances are that procurement process will go smoother.
Yeah.
But it still remains, it's hard for everyone, right? To find those clients, to get enough wins under your belt to get the trust of the bigger clients. I always tell our entrepreneurs, I'll never discourage someone away from pursuing a particular segment and the market, for instance, going for consumers. But the reality is that in South Africa, building a consumer business, tech business, is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Right. Unfortunately, unemployment is extremely high. The middle class is overgeared with debt. So you're selling to a very small consumer base, as opposed to, for instance, the US, where there's about a 4% unemployment rate. Everyone is pretty much employed.
Yeah.
Right? People have got disposable income. Markets like Dubai, great for consumer value propositions. South Africa, unfortunately, not. When times get tough, people just switch off your subscription.
Yes.
And you're screwed. So consumer is very difficult. Remains difficult no matter black, brown, white.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard. Enterprise, you have to know the right people or be the right person.
Yeah.
Be that person who's spent time in corporate. You understand the systems. You know the budgets. That's when you're like well suited to play that game. So once again, that remains hard for everyone, right? But as we mentioned, there are some nuances there that we must acknowledge. So access to market is extremely difficult. And a lot of our members actually, they say that access to market is broken. And I upon like reflection, I think I agree largely. There's a lot of work that needs to be done
100%.
to try and facilitate partnerships between bigger brothers and startups building innovative solutions. These are some of the things that are just hard, and compliance. Like oftentimes
red tape,
it's almost like you're punished for growing, right? You grow into a next phase where you're just in the beginning of the next threshold, and now you've got the requirements of a much larger business that you're having to keep up with. That is universal. So these are some of the things that are common, the difficult across the board.
All right. No, I thought it was just good for us to, highlight some of those things, because we'll take it for granted sometimes, and you just be thinking it's just me.
Oh yeah.
Or it's just me and my business. I'm being targeted, and yet it's like, no.
Yeah.
For certain things, it's just the environment.
Yeah.
It's just the economy. It's just the makeup of the country, the consumer spending power. Stuff like that. So it is an interesting one. In the last part of this discussion, I want to take a little bit of time to come back to your journey a little bit. You spoke about a platform like, you said Jonga.
Yeah, Jonga. Yeah.
Yes, and I believe you've also worked for the likes of Yoko, and others. But in all this time, you were running this community. Talk to us about that multitasking.
Oh man,
how
horrible.
are you apportioning your time?
Yeah, well, I mean,
do you sleep?
well, I obviously don't love sleeping a lot because I started Jonga when I was in the second year of my mechatronics engineering degree, which was hell. So I obviously did not love myself or I did not love sleep. So I guess my story has always been one of multitasking, of kind of doing more than one thing, studying, building this business, then building this business, now building a community, and then transitioned out of Jonga, went to Yoko whilst building the community. I guess what helped at the time was that because I didn't have a clarity of the vision and what this could become, it kind of was like a social thing. It was a thing that I was doing and just kind of cultivating on the side, but it didn't have such hectic demands on my time, right? And then over time, it just became more formal, and then it necessitated me to actually go into it full time, and that's where I'm at today. So I guess over time, one just learns good time management skills, knowing what to prioritize, having actually built something before, and taken it to a relatively big point.
Was Jonga something you exited?
We stopped working on it. Okay, yeah, very unfortunate. I think a number of factors. COVID lasting longer than anyone would have anticipated.
Yeah,
had a huge impact on the demand characteristics. People were at home.
Yeah,
people were cash strapped. It had an impact on the supply side. Components that would ordinarily take 3 months to get into the country are now taking a year.
Yeah.
So there was timing issues. Collections in the township is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Like monthly collections. So I think we were a bit early. I think a bit early in COVID as well. Combination of those two things took us out. And that's when I transitioned into Yoko.
Okay.
So I was not building Jonga while working Yoko.
Okay.
At the same time. Yeah. So it's just over time, I guess, realizing what to prioritize. And I think it's the kind of thing that you can only learn if you've actually done it before.
Yeah.
You've done it before, then okay, this is not as important. I need to focus on this. That event is not really relevant. Let me go to this one. And I think that's what's helped me over time. And at some point you get to the point where you realize that, okay, I realized that this community that I'm building actually has a lot more potential. So the words of my members got to me, and I realized this needs more attention. And that's when I started to then think of a plan out of formal employment back into being a builder. Because if I'm gonna be leading a community of builders and I'm no longer building, you lose touch with what it's like to really be the entrepreneur in the ring, hunting for your next meal. And then now you're just this person who's employed and comfortable telling people, hey, I think you should try this, I think you should try that. And you become that same problem, right? In the ecosystem of people who have never built anything, advising entrepreneurs. So it just occurred to me that, look, I have to get back in the ring. And that's what I've done.
I understand that through DIT, the platform, you've been able to facilitate up to 5 billion rand worth of capital raises. What does that mean exactly?
Oh, geez, I mean, I wish we were responsible for all of that. It's more, and I always say, like, it's when I represent the community, it's not me saying this is how great we are. Yeah. It's me saying this is how great these entrepreneurs are.
Yeah.
And all we exist to do is to champion their success and to ensure that they are visible out there in the ecosystem. So that's the number that represents how much they've raised in their respective journey. We probably have a role to play in that, a significant role, because we've connected them to a lot of really meaningful opportunities.
Okay.
But we're not responsible for all of it. So when they apply, they let us know this is where we're at. This is how much we've raised. This is how many jobs we've created. And we use all of that to once again shine the spotlight back on them and say, this is how cool they are. Yeah. So we're currently doing studies to understand our attribution in that.
Yeah.
But I don't yet have those numbers. But I'm really interested to see, like how have we actually been doing?
Yeah.
And up until only I think last year, I made the jump full time. Before then, it was about just creating a space for founders to belong.
Yeah.
But now it's about intentionally, how do we move the needle forward, and how do we get them over this chasm of death, which is the early stage, that early stage funding gap space, and get them to the later stage ecosystem, ready with the right knowledge this like a strong data room. Like essentially what we're trying to do is similar to what Y Combinator has done.
Yeah.
Right. When investors, later stage investors know you've been to this program, you've got that stamp of approval, and you'll know the fundamentals and you're strong. And I think we're trying to do that as well, to put that AAA grade stamp of approval on these entrepreneurs, because we've curated them, we've vetted them, we've exposed them to builders, right? We're very intentional about that, right? In our monthly masterclasses, we get people who've done it before to come and speak to them. So, you know, you will know that this person has heard from the right people, the right knowledge, they've got the, you know, the right stuff, and they, you know, you can invest in them, you can procure from them, and so forth, and you can work for them as well.
100%. And the other one, sort of coming back a little bit to something that we touched on earlier on around your Black industrialists and, you know, that type of thing. Your platform, you've partnered with Mgiba, which is probably one of, if not the largest, Black-owned IT companies in South Africa. Talk to us about that. Where are the synergies? How are you? I understand that part of their partnership has been leveraging that to expand geographically. Talk to us about that.
So I mean, we say that, and this is what we believe. Our philosophy is we want to partner with mission-driven, value-aligned people, and it's in our name. We're very unapologetic around who we're wanting to support, that's essentially we want to work with people who understand that mission, who say, yes, we can see that there is an issue in the ecosystem. It follows racial lines, and we want to aid you in developing them because you guys have done it before. So we're not only going to do it ourselves, but we're going to back you guys with the resources to support them. And Mgiba is just a perfect example of that. You know, their story is incredible. Black founder, you know, in the ICT sector, which at the time looked a lot like high growth tech sector does today, and you know, was able to persevere and grow this business into what it is today. So even though the high growth tech sector is slightly different to services, we recognize that there's a lot we can learn from their journey. So that was the basis on which we engaged. And you know, when we did start engaging, we realized that they just got it. And that's one of the things that we look out for now in partnering is, do you get it? Or do we find ourselves having to explain and justify? And if, you know, we want to work with guys who get it and guys who are passionate and say, okay, we want to support you guys. So that partnership has unlocked a lot for us, right? It's enabled us to focus on it full time, which is it's very important if we're going to actually support. And, you know, you have to get your hands dirty and do high touch stuff. And you can't do that while you're working a job. So it's enabled us to now put more support. But it's also enabled us to bring some of the, you know, the best entrepreneurs around the continent to come in and actually address our members, which is also just so fantastic in terms of cultivating a Pan-African mindset, but also just being inspired, right? So it's really enabled a lot from that perspective. But ultimately where it's going is that we want to actually ensure market access. That's important, because if we're teaching you, you know, and we're inspiring you, but there's no opportunity at the end of the day, what is it for, you know? So they've had the foresight to see that, you know, yes, we've got partnerships with, you know, the Oracles, the Microsoft, the Huaweis, but how do we differentiate ourselves? Because so do our competitors. And it's brilliant thinking from them. Like, this is the future of tech. These guys are innovating the products and solutions of tomorrow. If we get that proximity to these guys, we essentially will be able to offer differentiated AI native solutions to the market before anyone else. And that's what we're currently discussing at the moment, is how do we then start to plug in these entrepreneurs as capabilities? So it becomes a real strategic investment on their end. It's not just giving money to, you know, Black people. It's strategic. And, you know, we're open to so many more partnerships like that. In fact, we're canvassing now for that. We're having conversations, and, you know, maybe someone listening to the interview as well might feel like, well, that makes a lot of sense.
Something to jump onto.
Something to jump onto. And I think, you know, what we're noticing and what we're seeing is that a lot of the capabilities that corporates need are being built faster outside of their businesses than inside.
Yes. And you see it within how a lot of startups, there's a lot of consolidation, and a lot of corporates coming and sniffing out those companies to get that capability.
So partnering with us gives you a structured pipeline to the innovation of tomorrow.
Lastly, and I I don't know whether it lends itself to this point that you're talking about when you're talking about canvassing for other partners, etc. Is you're looking for PBO status, which would be public benefit organization status.
Yeah.
How does that help you? Is that a formalization? Why that type of structure specifically? And does that help you when it comes to those engagements, with your corporates and that type of thing? Yeah.
No. Spot on. So I mean, there's a pocket of money that's available, that's mandated by government to corporates to spend on socio-economic development and enterprise development. And having that PBO status just shows that like we're legit. We're in this for the impact that we're trying to achieve. So it's not to say we needed to do the work. We're doing the work anyway, but it just validates and shows our credibility in the space. So that's the first thing that it helps us with. But two, there are a lot of good people who we're seeing who have jobs, and they're self-aware enough to know that I'm not the entrepreneur in the room, but I want to support them, right? Because I'm earning my bonus, I've bought my house, I've bought my whatever, and I want to know what I can do. I feel like I can do more. So those people, I think, have funding that they want to bring to the table, but sometimes they have time, they have networks, expertise that could help validate what our entrepreneurs are building. And a lot of the times they want to assist from the goodness of their heart. But once, life gets real, demands of family, the demands of work increase, it becomes difficult. Although your heart is there, because there isn't a direct incentive, an immediate incentive rather, it becomes difficult to honor your commitment. So part of having that PBO status will allow us to then reward those people who say, I actually want to give some of my time, or I want to give some of my network and provide technical assistance or advisory. Then you can actually just invoice us and we'll give you that tax certificate, which unlocks that break for you.
Nice.
So it's actually going to be a key part of the strategy
very strategic,
of our strategy around how do we then mobilize career professionals to funnel their resources, to funnel their time and expertise into our members. So this is the first time I'm sharing this on a public platform, but it's going to be an important key to unlocking that strategy. And it's not to say that people don't have good hearts. It's just that, you understand that life is busy and everyone is trying to build something for themselves. So how do you add that cherry on top so that we ensure that it's sustainable and people are rewarded for taking that risk?
All right. Ntsako, unfortunately, we need to round up the session.
Yeah.
I could talk to you for more hours because I do have so many different curiosities. So maybe that's impetus for us to get you back into the room. But it has been quite a rich discussion, just understanding what's going on in your particular space. I think a couple of things that have really stood out to me is this element around being a builder and how important it is, for builders to be in community with each other. And especially for first-time builders to learn from, other people. Like you said, there isn't a lack of literature on how to do things, but those contextually aware insights, the pragmatic approaches to South Africa, to the realities of building something here, is probably something that is not as abundant as it's meant to be. Also understanding the fact that there's almost a privilege that comes with being a builder, right? And also getting the trust of other builders, which is the space that you occupy. Because I felt it when you said, I've been a builder, so people know that I've walked the journey, which is why I'm trusted to convene, this particular space. Because a lot of people, I've come across one or two other platforms that have tried to do something like this, but I think that piece, probably lends itself the most to why you've probably endured longer than what other people have, been able to do.
I've chewed the glass.
Yes. Other people would say you've paid your school fees, right? Also understanding, the two big things that we spoke about, and how you guys are addressing, those things. Firstly, the knowledge gap, which we spoke about. But secondly, how do you mobilize those resources from, your your black professionals, your black business people, entrepreneurs to feed and pour, into that next generation, and so that we can actually participate in that wealth creation that's being done through some of these startups, especially your tech-enabled businesses. Also understanding a little bit around the realities of just being a South African entrepreneur. Before we even talk about the racial element, which adds another layer, some of the realities, that was actually, quite key, especially the consumer piece.
Yes.
Also understanding the types of business models that just do not work, like SaaS. SaaS, great in the US.
Great in the US.
Yes, but
No.
It can be very tough. And then at the end, they just understanding how a partnership like the one with Gijima can actually help to unlock, certain value for yourselves and also for, the community that you're trying to build. So thank you so much for being with us on the platform. We have been talking to Ntsako. He was able to share with us his 2 cents around what's happening in the venture space, in the startup space, in the tech space in South Africa. Why aren't we having more founders? He's giving us some understanding around the dynamics around funding, the dynamics around talent, the dynamics around how you go about doing things that are counterintuitive at the beginning for you to be able to then ultimately scale your business. So it has been a great discussion. So Ntsako, thank you so much for giving us your 2 cents.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. And I look forward to talking again.
All right, so that's it for today, and we've been in discussion with Ntsako. He is the founder of Darkies in Tech, and that's been his 2 cents.